A stale plane, a middle seat, and a career-making presentation. That's all I expected from my flight to DC. What I got was a front row seat to a national security nightmare, and a starring role I never auditioned for. The air in a plane is always stale. Recycled and thin, it carries the faint scent of jet fuel, disinfectant, and the Cinnabon stand 2 gates over. I was jammed into seat 17B, a middle seat on a sold-out flight from Chicago to DC, trying to mentally rehearse the opening lines of a presentation that could make or break my career. My laptop was stowed, my tie was already feeling like a noose, and all I wanted was for the cabin door to close so we could get this metal tube in the air. That's when the trouble started. It started with a woman in pearls and a pantsuit so beige it seemed to absorb the light around it. She was standing in the aisle, looking down at the man in the window seat, 17A. He was a black man, probably in his late 40s, impeccably dressed in a simple, well-tailored dark suit. He had headphones on, his eyes closed, looking for all the world like he was already 1,000 miles away. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're in my seat." The man opened his eyes. They were calm, clear eyes. He slowly removed his headphones. "I'm sorry?" "My seat," she repeated, gesturing with a ticket clutched in her hand. 17A. The window. "You need to move." I could see the boarding pass in his hand, resting on the book in his lap. He held it up without a word. "I believe I'm in the right spot." 17A. The woman scoffed, a little puff of indignation. "Well, there's been a mistake. I specifically booked the window. I need to see the window. I get claustrophobic." She flagged down a flight attendant who was trying to wrangle an oversized carry-on into an overhead bin. "Excuse me. This man is in my seat." The flight attendant, a weary-looking woman named Brenda according to her name tag, came over. The predictable dance began. She looked at the woman's ticket. She looked at the man's ticket. She smiled a tight, professional smile. "Ma'am, it seems you're in 17C, the aisle seat right here," Brenda said, pointing. "This gentleman is correctly seated in 17A. "That's impossible," the woman insisted, her voice rising in pitch, drawing a few curious glances from the rows around us. "My corporate travel agent never makes mistakes. He must have switched them. Or maybe his ticket is for another flight." The man in 17A just sighed, a quiet, tired sound. He looked at the flight attendant. "My name is on the ticket. The flight number is correct. I am in the right seat." His voice was deep and steady, a stark contrast to the woman's shrill panic. Brenda, the flight attendant, was trying her best to de-escalate. "Ma'am, I assure you, the system is correct. If you'll just take your seat in 17C, we can get ready for departure." But the woman in beige wasn't having it. She planted her feet in the aisle, blocking the last few passengers trying to get to the back of the plane. "No, I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable with him sitting there." She wasn't looking at the flight attendant anymore. She was staring at the man by the window. She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow louder than her shouting. "He was acting strange when I walked up. Shifty." A cold silence fell over our little section of the plane. The word shifty hung in the stale air, thick and ugly. I saw the man in 17A clench his jaw, just for a second. His calm was still there, but it looked like it was costing him something. I felt a knot form in my own stomach. I just wanted to get to DC. I just wanted to disappear. But now I was a spectator, trapped in the middle of a drama I wanted no part of. "Ma'am," Brenda said, her professional patience finally cracking. "There is no reason for this. Please take your seat, or we will have to call the gate agent." Call whoever you want," the woman declared, her voice now full of righteous fury. "I'm a first-class citizen on this airline, and I will not be made to feel unsafe. Look at him. He won't even make eye contact. He's probably planning something." This was insane. The man had been the picture of tranquility until she started harassing him. Now, several passengers were pulling out their phones, the little red recording lights winking on. The man in 17A finally turned his head and looked directly at the woman. His gaze was so intense, so focused, that she actually took half a step back. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice was dangerously low, "you're making a very serious mistake." That was all it took. The woman gasped as if he'd physically struck her. "He's threatening me. Did you hear that? He's threatening me. Get him off this plane. I demand you remove him right now." The flight attendant threw her hands up and spoke into the little phone at the front of the cabin. A moment later, a supervisor in a slightly different uniform appeared. The whole story was recounted, with the woman in beige adding new, more dramatic details about how the man had given her a threatening look and was muttering under his breath. The supervisor, a man with a clipboard and a permanently worried expression, tried to reason with her, then with the man in the window seat, asking if he wouldn't mind moving, just to resolve the situation. The man in 17A didn't even blink. "I will not be moving from the seat I paid for because this woman is having a paranoid fantasy." The supervisor sighed, defeated. The woman in beige crossed her arms, a smug look on her face. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing a delay due to a customer service issue. A collective groan went through the cabin. The supervisor whispered something into his radio. A few minutes passed in tense, agonizing silence. I watched the man in 17A. He had put his headphones back on, closed his eyes, and completely shut out the world. A perfect statue of defiance in a sea of chaos. Then, the cabin door hissed open again. It wasn't a late passenger. It was 2 airport security officers. Their faces were grim. Their radios crackled with static. And they were walking straight down the aisle, their eyes locked on one person, and one person only. The quiet man in 17A. The 2 officers were big men, built to fill doorways, and they seemed to suck all the remaining air out of the cabin as they stopped at our row. The murmur of conversation and phone recording died instantly. It was as if someone had hit a universal mute button. The woman in beige looked vindicated, a nasty little smirk playing on her lips. "Sir," the first officer said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that was clearly used to being obeyed. "We need you to gather your belongings and come with us." The man in 17A didn't move a muscle. He slowly turned his head from the window and looked at the officer. He didn't seem scared or intimidated. He seemed annoyed, like a man being bothered by a fly during an important meeting. "And why would I do that?" he asked, his voice still level, still calm. "We've received a complaint of a disturbance. The airline has requested you be removed from the flight." The man actually let out a short, incredulous laugh. "The woman who has been blocking the aisle, screaming, and making false accusations is the one who filed a complaint? And you're removing me?" He gestured vaguely towards the woman in beige. "The disturbance is standing right there." "See," the woman shrieked, her voice cracking. "He's belligerent, uncooperative. I told you he was dangerous." The second officer, who had been silent until now, leaned in. His face was inches from mine, and I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Sir, we're not going to ask you again. Get up now." "I see. I am a ticketed passenger in my assigned seat, obeying all crew instructions," the man said, enunciating each word with precision. "You have no legal grounds to remove me. If you touch me, it will be assault." That was it. The line had been crossed. The first officer grunted, "Okay, have it your way," and reached across me to grab the man's arm. The moment his fingers made contact, the man in 17A coiled like a spring. He didn't throw a punch or yell, but his entire body went rigid. He used the leverage of the seat to hold his ground, and for a moment it was a bizarre, silent tableau of force and resistance. "Stop resisting," the officer grunted, his face turning red with exertion. They were now actively trying to haul him out of his seat. His book slid to the floor. His suit jacket was getting twisted. I was pinned between them, the officer's hip digging into my shoulder, the arm of the man in 17A pressing against my leg. Phones were up everywhere, a forest of tiny lenses capturing every humiliating second. I could hear people gasping. Someone behind me whispered, "This is awful." The chaos finally brought the final boss out of hiding. The cockpit door opened and the captain emerged, his pilot's hat slightly askew, his face a thundercloud of frustration. "What is going on in my plane?" he boomed, and his voice, amplified by years of making intercom announcements, cut through the noise. The officers let go of the man, and everyone started talking at once. The supervisor pointed, the woman in beige wailed about being threatened, the officers talked about non-compliance. The captain held up a hand for silence. He looked at the supervisor, at the officers, at the woman, and then his eyes settled on the man in 17A, who was now calmly straightening his jacket and tie as if he were merely brushing off some lint. The captain sighed, the sound of a man whose flight was now irrevocably delayed. He looked at the man in the window seat. "Sir, I don't know what happened here, and frankly, I don't care. This is my aircraft, and this situation is over. I am ordering you to deplane. Please collect your things and leave peacefully." It felt like the final judgment. The ultimate authority had spoken. The man in 17A stared at the captain for a long, silent moment. His shoulders slumped just a fraction, the first sign of defeat I had seen from him. The woman in beige looked like she was about to pop a champagne cork. "Fine," the man said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the weight of a stone. He unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood up, a feat of agility in the cramped space. The security officers immediately flanked him, gripping his biceps. He was now a prisoner. "I'll go," he said, his eyes scanning the faces around him. The captain, the smug woman, the officers, the sea of phone cameras. His eyes even met mine for a split second, and what I saw in them wasn't fear or anger. It was something colder. It was pity. "But before I do," he continued, his voice dropping to a steely, serious tone. He shrugged off the officer's hands with surprising strength and reached slowly, deliberately into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. The woman in beige let out a terrified yelp. "He's going for a weapon." The officers tensed, their hands dropping towards their belts. "Show me your hands, right now," one of them shouted, his voice suddenly filled with genuine panic. The entire cabin held its breath. The man ignored them all. With a fluid motion, he pulled out a black leather billfold. He didn't open it to get an ID. He snapped it open with an practiced flick of his wrist, holding it up for the two security officers to see. The cheap cabin lights glinted off a polished golden seal, a familiar eagle staring back with imperious eyes. "You and the captain might want to look at this," he said, his voice now devoid of any emotion except pure, chilling authority. "Because you are all about 3 seconds from committing a felony by interfering with a federal agent on official duty." The silence that followed was absolute. It was deeper than before, heavier. It was the sound of 100 people simultaneously realizing they had profoundly misunderstood the situation. The little gold badge in the man's wallet seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the cabin. It wasn't just a badge, it was a shift in the entire power dynamic of the plane. The two beefy security officers, who had been seconds away from physically dragging him down the aisle, now looked like schoolboys caught cheating on a test. Their hands, which had been reaching for their gear, now hung limply at their sides. The first officer squinted, leaning in closer, as if he couldn't trust his eyes. "FBI?" he croaked, the word barely a whisper. The agent, didn't answer. He just held the badge steady, his gaze locked on the officer, letting the reality of it sink in. He then slowly panned his hand, showing the badge to the second officer, then to the stunned flight supervisor, and finally to the captain, who had gone pale under his tan. The woman in beige, who had been preening in her victory just moments before, now looked like she had seen a ghost. Her jaw was slack, her face a mask of disbelief. That's a fake," she stammered, though her voice lacked any conviction. "It has to be." The agent finally lowered his wallet and slipped it back into his jacket pocket with a practiced, almost dismissive gesture. He looked at the captain. "Captain, your name is—" Williams. David Williams," the captain stammered, his booming voice from moments before reduced to a nervous squeak. "Captain Williams," the agent said, his tone now cold and clinical, like a surgeon describing a procedure. "You have delayed this flight, created a public disturbance, and attempted to unlawfully remove a federal officer from transport while he was en route to a priority national security assignment. My name is Special Agent Marcus Thorne. Now, I suggest you get on your little radio, call your dispatch, and have them connect you to the FBI's Washington field office. You can ask for Assistant Director Jensen. Tell him that his lead agent on Operation Nightfall is being detained on your aircraft by airport security. I suspect he will be very, very interested to hear about that." Every word was a hammer blow. Operation Nightfall. Assistant Director Jensen. These weren't just names, they were keys to a world none of us had access to. A world of consequence and authority that made a seating dispute seem laughably insignificant. The security officers exchanged a panicked glance. The flight supervisor looked like he was about to be physically ill. Captain Williams swallowed hard. "Sir, Agent Thorne, there's been a misunderstanding." "There has been no misunderstanding," Agent Thorne cut in sharply. "I was assaulted by your security personnel at the direction of your crew, based on the hysterical and baseless accusations of this woman." He finally turned his gaze back to the woman in beige, and it was like watching a predator size up its prey. She visibly shrank back against the seat. "Ma'am, making a false report against a federal officer is a serious crime, so is interfering with an investigation. You've now done both, very publicly." The forest of phones was still up, but now the mood had shifted from capturing a viral injustice to documenting the most spectacular self-destruction they had ever witnessed. The woman's face, once smug, was now ashen. The smirk was gone, replaced by the dawning horror of what she had set in motion. I didn't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. I felt—" "You felt what?" "It's," Agent Thorne pressed, taking a small step toward her in the aisle. "You felt entitled to my seat. You felt you could use my race to manipulate the crew into getting your way. You felt you had the right to disrupt the travel of every single person on this plane because of your own prejudice. You need to choose your next words very, very carefully." The captain, desperate to regain control, jumped in. "Agent Thorne, on behalf of the airline, I sincerely apologize. This is a complete breakdown of our protocol. Please take your seat. We can depart immediately." He turned to the security officers. "You two, you're done here. Go." The officers practically tripped over themselves to escape the claustrophobic fuselage. The supervisor was already whispering frantically into his radio, no doubt trying to get ahead of the storm that was about to break over his head. Agent Thorne didn't move. He stood there in the aisle, a pillar of calm fury. He looked at the captain, then back at the woman, who was now clutching her beige purse like a life raft. He wasn't done. This wasn't just about getting back to his seat. This was about something else. "It's not that simple, Captain," Thorne said, slowly, his voice dangerously quiet again. "This isn't about a flight delay anymore." He reached into his pocket again, but this time he didn't pull out his badge. He pulled out a small, sleek, government-issue smartphone. He tapped the screen a few times, then held it to his ear. A tense silence stretched as we all waited for him to speak. Who was he calling? The assistant director? A team to arrest the woman? The possibilities seemed endless and terrifying. "Yes," he said into the phone. "I've been compromised. The situation is contained, but the initial phase is a bust." He paused, listening. The entire plane was silent enough to hear the hum of the auxiliary power unit. "No, the local asset is burned. We need to activate the alternate." Another pause. His eyes scanned the cabin, and for a terrifying second, they locked directly onto mine. My heart hammered against my ribs. What was he talking about? Local asset. Alternate. Then he spoke one final chilling sentence into the phone that made the blood in my veins turn to ice. "Yes, I'm looking at him right now. Seat 17B. It's time to bring him in." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Every eye in the cabin swiveled from Agent Thorne and landed squarely on me. Me. 17B. The guy in the wrinkled suit just trying to get to a marketing presentation in D.C. A wave of nausea washed over me. This had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. I felt the blood drain from my face and my mouth went dry as dust. I could feel the stares of 200 people drilling into me, their curiosity instantly morphing into suspicion. Who was I? What did I have to do with any of this? Agent Thorne lowered his phone, his expression unreadable, and looked at me. It wasn't an accusatory look. It was a look of confirmation. "Mr. Henderson," he said, his voice now calm, almost casual, which was somehow more terrifying than his anger. I could only manage a choked nod. "My name." He knew my name. "My apologies for the public nature of this, Mr. Henderson," he continued, seemingly oblivious to the pandemonium of silent questions swirling around us. "Your activation was meant to be a bit more discreet. But circumstances have changed." He took a step closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. The man you were supposed to meet at Dulles is compromised. The woman in 17C, he nodded almost imperceptibly at the beige pantsuit lady, who was now staring at me with a fresh kind of horror, wasn't just a nuisance. She was a spotter. Her job was to create a scene, identify you, and confirm you were on this flight. She just didn't know who I was. My mind was a whirlwind. Activation? Spotter? I wasn't a spy. I sold enterprise software solutions. I had a PowerPoint deck in my carry-on, not a set of lockpicks. I think you have the wrong person, I stammered, my voice a pathetic squeak. Thorne gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. No, Mr. Henderson, I don't. The password for your company's quarterly earnings report. What is it? It was the most bizarre question I'd ever been asked. It's capital gains 22, I said, completely bewildered. And if you reverse the last two digits, capital gains 22 becomes capital gains 20. Wait, capital gains 202. That's the emergency activation code, I whispered, the words coming out of my mouth before my brain could even process them. It was a protocol I'd learned in a dry, windowless room 2 years ago, a contingency plan for a corporate espionage program I was a part of, designed to protect sensitive company data. I was a sleeper, a data courier, but for a tech firm, not the government. Or so I thought. Your company has been working under a DARPA contract for the last 18 months, Mr. Henderson, Thorne explained in a low murmur. The software you're carrying isn't for a marketing presentation. It's a next-generation counter-encryption key, and the people our friend in beige works for want it very badly. He looked over my head. Captain, we will be departing now. Seal the cabin door. No one gets on or off this plane until we land in Washington. That is a federal order. The captain, looking utterly defeated, just nodded numbly and retreated to the cockpit. The flight attendants, wide-eyed, began moving through the cabin, their routine pre-flight checks now feeling surreal. Thorne then turned his attention back to the woman in 17C. She looked completely broken, her carefully constructed world of privilege and outrage shattered. As for you, Thorne said, his voice flat, you're going to sit down in your assigned aisle seat. You will not speak. You will not look at your phone. You will not move until we land, at which point 2 of my colleagues will be waiting to escort you to a place where you can answer some very important questions. He didn't raise his voice, but the threat was unmistakable. Trembling, the woman stumbled and sank into seat 17C, her face a pale, tear-streaked mess. The drama was over. She had picked a fight with the one person on the plane she absolutely shouldn't have, and in doing so, had not only humiliated herself but had exposed her entire operation. Thorne looked back at me. Just stay calm, Mr. Henderson. The flight will be about an hour. When we land, someone will meet you at the gate and take your laptop. Your presentation in D.C. is cancelled. You'll be on a flight home by this evening. As far as anyone is concerned, you were just a guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. He then calmly sat back down in his window seat, 17A, picked up his book from the floor, and put his headphones on. Within seconds he looked exactly as he had when this all started. A quiet, impeccably dressed man minding his own business. The engines began to whine, and the plane finally pushed back from the gate. I sat there, frozen in my middle seat, sandwiched between a federal agent on a covert mission and a captured enemy spy. The recycled air still tasted stale, but now it was charged with the electric thrill of a secret world I had stumbled into. My boring presentation on software solutions was forgotten. My life, I realized, as the plane accelerated down the runway and lifted into the sky, would never be quite the same.